Widespread floods continue to emerge across China, affecting millions. Officials say it will go on through the summer. The Chinese Communist regime continues to crack down on Christians. Recently, a church was demolished because authorities say it's too eye-catching. The guardrail of a Chinese bridge crumbles under the touch of a man's fingers. An official confirmed the video contents are true. To cope with its dire economic situation, China has constantly changed its strategy. The latest phrase is economic internal circulation, indicating a big change. And the first Chinese internet company to go public in the U.S., online media outlet Sina, could be delisted. That's after being listed on the Nasdaq for 20 years. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. We recently reported on an unusual traffic accident in China. Now, Chinese internet users are speculating that a social injustice issue was behind the crash. On Tuesday, a bus in China slowed down while driving along a busy road. It then made a sharp turn, crashed through a fence and into the reservoir below. Authorities say 21 were killed. Soon after, government censorship seemed to follow. An image emerged online which appeared to be a notice from local government officials, asking employees to not accept media interviews and reminded them to follow the official narrative. A screenshot from Chinese social media app WeChat is now widely circulating online. It says the local government previously attempted to demolish the bus driver's house, a common occurrence in China when the government decides to use residents' land for new projects. The screenshot adds that the driver had been trying to defend his property before the accident. The information could not be independently verified. Chinese authorities haven't released details about the driver or the total number of passengers on the bus. We tried to interview a local, but he appeared fearful of breaking away from the official narrative, lest he be punished.
The government tried to demolish his house, and he didn't agree. The government doesn't allow people to talk about this. Don't ask. If I tell you anything, then I would be inciting subversion.
Heavy flooding continues across China, putting into question the safety of reservoirs and China's grain supplies.
According to officials, torrential rains and widespread flood in southern China has so far killed over 100 people, and over 100 Chinese rivers have exceeded warning levels. One key reservoir in the southeast has opened all of its 9 spillways to discharge the floodwater, the first time since the reservoir was built in the 1940s. Chinese media reports that the amount of rain this summer hasn't been seen in decades. In Hubei province alone, the amount of rain in June equals half of the water volume of China's biggest lake. Officials say the heavy rain will continue. They warned about the possibilities of flood from all major rivers in both the north and south, frequent landslides, and the safety of the water reservoirs. They called the flood control situation not optimistic. The ongoing flood is adding one more test to the ruling Communist Party. It's already grappling with the pandemic, its struggling economy, and international pressure for its virus cover-up. Meanwhile, the flood also raises further concerns over grain supplies in China. Many of the provinces suffering from the flood are major producers of grains, and supplies have already suffered due to the pandemic. Agricultural officials from Sichuan province told Radio Free Asia that the authorities are currently encouraging farmers to convert their fruit farms to ones that grow rice. They say the policy is national and officials are offering large subsidies for farmers who do so. In May, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said it was imperative to ensure food supply and reward grain producers. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Believe your eyes. A video shows the guardrail of a bridge crumbling under the touch of a man's fingers. Later, an official from the local transportation bureau confirmed the video's contents are true. A video from Chongqing became an internet buzz. It shows a man crushing the material of bridge guardrail with his bare hands. Viewers are shocked and question the quality of the bridge. And some people question if the video is real or not. On Tuesday, a local official admitted to local media that the video is real. The bridge was started in 2017 and finished 1 year ago. A local official says it has not yet been fully signed off. The bridge is 350 feet long and cost around $700,000 US. The bridge building company was founded about 3 decades ago, but does not seem to have a good reputation. It has a record of 5 administrative penalties resulting from quality issues or failure to submit tax information in accordance with regulations. The bridge is said to have passed a professional load test and can be used. The local authority emphasizes that the Guardrail is a subsidiary project using ready-made cast stone rails. They said they started an investigation to look into the quality of the bridge. Amid the pandemic and natural disasters, the Chinese regime continues its crackdown on Christianity. Recently, a church was demolished because authorities claimed it was too eye-catching.
It might take years for Christians in China to get construction of their church approved by officials, but it took only a few seconds for the regime to demolish it. With the pandemic, widespread flooding, and growing international pressure following the regime's virus cover-up, Chinese officials have plenty to keep them busy. But that's not stopping their persecution of people of faith. According to a report by Bitter Winter magazine, Chinese authorities have recently demolished or shut down several churches. One of them was criticized by officials for being unlicensed and too eye-catching. Another, after being forced to close in May, was converted into a party members' activity center. The church's cross was replaced with the regime's red flags and propaganda posters. The destruction comes as authorities have ramped up their control over churches in recent years. In addition to traditional crackdown methods, like arresting pastors and burning churches, the regime has also taken up a new approach. Since late last year, it's been demanding that all churches subscribe to Chinese Communist Party's newspapers like the People's Daily. A clergy member told Bitter Winter that the church feels the subscription violates their beliefs, and no one reads them, but they have to do what the government tells them to evade persecution. Earlier this year, a church in central China was destroyed for refusing to raise the communist regime's flag. It was built over $4 million worth of funding, all donated by local parishioners. Chinese authorities had also previously forced churches and religious believers to replace images of the cross with portraits of communist leaders Xi Jinping and Mao Zedong. Bitter Winter reported that in the first quarter of the year, Chinese authorities removed crosses from at least 250 churches in one southern province alone. Even though religious freedom was written into Chinese constitution in 1982, churches are illegal in the country, except for the state-run 3 self-patriotic churches. They are led by the so-called 3 Self-Patriotic Movement Committee. According to their chapters, the churches are under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Government. They pledge to love the socialist motherland and actively participate in the construction of a socialist society with Chinese characteristics. The 3 self-patriotic churches were created in the 1950s by Wu Yaozong. He had vowed that members of the church would break away from Western imperialism and actively join the Korea War to resist what he called U.S. aggressions. Members of the 3 self-churches were once found to be dressed in the Communist Party's Red Army uniforms when visiting one of the regime's wartime bases. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
To cope with its dire economic situation, the Chinese Communist Party has been constantly changing its strategy. China's vice premier has coined a new phrase in response: economic internal circulation. But what does the expression really mean? NTD's Xu Wenhui has more.
Liu He, China's vice premier, recently coined an expression, economic internal circulation. He explained that in China, a pattern is taking shape, and domestic circulation is playing a dominant role. Some take it as a sign that the world must decouple from the Chinese Communist Party. Others question how long the so-called internal circulation can last. The fast spread of the CCP virus has caused PPE equipment shortages in countries around the world. Amid the pandemic's suffering, some began to question current manufacturing and distribution practices, especially with so many supply chains clustered in China. The US and Japan have recently been encouraging domestic companies that operate in China to leave the country. The governments have even promised to foot the moving bill as an incentive. Beijing's national security law on Hong Kong has also further triggered the trend globally. Liu He is China's chief representative for US-China trade negotiations. USC professor Frank Xie says He's expression, economic internal circulation, indicates that China is in a desperate situation over its trade relations and exports. Professor Xie explained that China's internal circulation tells us that the country can no longer rely on international markets for growth.
It basically says made in China, consume in China. The so-called self-reliance is actually the consequence of being pushed away from world economy.
But UCLA economist William Yu sees it differently. He interprets the phrase as more of an idealistic saying and concludes it would be impossible for China to be 100% self-reliant. He urges people to focus more on the economic difficulties China is facing.
China has to import high-tech raw materials and products through Hong Kong. China cannot import directly from US or Europe. The execution of national security law makes it impossible.
He cites the tech industry as an example, as China heavily relies on technology and innovation from the US. But U.S. sanctions have proved costly for telecoms giant Huawei and other Chinese tech companies, which are restricted from importing tech components from the West. That, plus the recent U.S. decision to treat Hong Kong as part of the mainland, has put the country in a jam. Yu also noted another example of China's dependence on other countries. China has to import many agricultural products because its natural resources aren't enough to fulfill its needs. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
China's central bank is stepping up its effort to digitize the Chinese yuan. It's now partnering up with a ride-sharing company to test the use of the digital currency. China's central bank is partnering up with Didi Chuxing to test a new digital currency called Digital Currency Electronic Payment, or DCEP. In a statement, Didi says it's working with the People's Bank of China to apply the digital currency on its ride-hailing app. Didi dominates the ride-hailing market in China with a total of over 550 million users. The Chinese central bank has been researching a national digital currency since 2014. This will be one of the first rollout in the real world. Unlike other cryptocurrencies, which are decentralized, the Chinese digital currency will be issued and backed by the Chinese central bank, and it won't provide the same anonymity as other cryptocurrencies do. China has issued a veiled threat to the U.S. after the FBI director commented on the Communist Party's spying practices. FBI Director Christopher Wray said on Tuesday that China's espionage efforts are the greatest long-term threat to U.S. national security.
We've now reached the point where the FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours. Of the nearly 5,000 active FBI counterintelligence cases currently underway across the country, almost half are all related to China.
To which China's foreign ministry spokesperson responded, they better not think that China's security bureaus are vegetarians. He's using a Chinese idiom, meaning Chinese officials are not to be messed with. Now we turn to the economy. Chinese tech company and online media outlet Sina could delist from the U.S. The company revealed in a statement it had gotten an acquisition proposal of $2.7 billion. The offer comes from New Wave, a company controlled by Sina's chairman and CEO. In the statement, Sina says New Wave offered to buy out all the outstanding shares for $41 per share. This makes Sina the latest U.S.-listed Chinese company to consider a privatization offer as tensions rise between the U.S. and China. It was also the first Chinese internet company to go public in the U.S., first appearing on the Nasdaq in 2000. Sina operates 4 main businesses, among which is China's Twitter-like social media platform Weibo. Weibo is listed separately on the Nasdaq. Chinese companies listed on the Nasdaq have come under increased scrutiny after Chinese coffee house Luckin Coffee's admission of financial fraud. There's been a trend among Chinese tech firms choosing to delist in the U.S. only to relist in Hong Kong. Sina could do the same. In similar news, the White House is warning against investing in Chinese stocks. According to the New York Times, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien and Director of the National Economic Council, Larry Kudlow, say investing in China poses unnecessary economic risk to retirees. Their comments reportedly came in a letter to the U.S. Railroad Retirement Board. The letter went on to say such investments would fund firms that raise significant national security and humanitarian concerns. That's as White House officials say more sanctions on China could be on the way. The Railroad Retirement Board is an independent federal agency. According to the report, it managed nearly $30 billion worth of assets in 2018. Bipartisan lawmakers have also questioned whether federal retirement funds should go to Chinese companies with ties to the regime's military. Now we turn to Hong Kong and the backlash Beijing is facing for its new national security law. More and more major internet and social media platforms are refusing to process requests for user data made by Hong Kong government. The suspension began following China's establishment of its national security law, which stirred fears of curbs on Hong Kong's civil liberties. Microsoft, Zoom, and messaging app Signal suspended processing government requests for user data in Hong Kong. They follow Facebook, Google, Twitter, and messaging app Telegram, which have already made similar announcements. TikTok, owned by Chinese firm ByteDance, has said it plans to exit Hong Kong in the coming days. Signal has recently become the most downloaded app in Hong Kong. It provides end-to-end encryption to secure messages from being intercepted by third parties and doesn't collect user data. Tech companies have long operated freely in Hong Kong, unaffected by the censorship firewall imposed in mainland China. Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Telegram services are blocked in mainland China, while Microsoft, Zoom, and Apple can be used. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has announced the Trump administration will impose travel bans on Chinese Communist Party or CCP officials involved in the policies over Tibet access. He accuses China of systematically restricting foreigners' access to Tibet, while Chinese visitors enjoy far greater access to the U.S. Pompeo added that access to Tibetan areas is increasingly vital to regional stability, given China's human rights abuses there. That's in addition to Beijing's failure to prevent environmental degradation near the headwaters of Asia's major rivers. Beijing says it won't allow foreign interference in what it calls Tibetan affairs, adding that it will impose visa restrictions on U.S. citizens with so-called bad behavior over Tibet. Tibet is an autonomous region of China. 70 years ago, the CCP sent its troops into the area to crush an uprising. The invasion forced the Dalai Lama, a Tibetan spiritual leader, and over 80,000 Tibetans into exile. And to India. India now requires e-commerce firms like Amazon, Flipkart, and others to display country of origin on each product sold online in India. Its government has set an August 1st deadline for companies to display the information for new listings on e-commerce platforms. The move comes amid ongoing tensions between India and China after 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a border clash in June. China never revealed its casualties. Indian trader groups have since called for a boycott of products made in China. It's in response to the regime's call for self-reliance. Chinese goods face strict scrutiny as they enter Indian ports, and so far the country has banned about 60 apps made by Chinese developers. Germany's interior minister says Chinese espionage is a serious concern in the country. It comes as a 74-year-old man and his wife are under investigation for espionage. NTD's Ariane Pastar has the details.
Espionage has become a hot topic in Germany in recent months, with Berlin named a hotspot for spies. According to the German parliament's chair of the Intelligence Committee, almost every month an alleged Chinese spy is arrested in Berlin. The chief of Germany's domestic intelligence agency said at a recent parliament hearing that Berlin was already the city with the most spies for some time, and in his opinion, the country's spying problem is at its worst in decades.
My impression is Berlin has been the capital of spies for some time now. The level of espionage activities against German interests is at the same level as during the Cold War, or even exceeds it in some areas.
Last week, Germany's interior minister confirmed that espionage, especially from China, is a serious issue. And he tied it to the Chinese Communist Party's One Belt, One Road, a global infrastructure and investment initiative to boost China's geopolitical influence. More than 60 countries have signed up to the initiative. He told a German newspaper, "We know that the Chinese are interested in our critical infrastructure." So to German officials, it is clear that Chinese spies are posing a threat. One unusual case is standing out from the crowd. In the last week of June, German public broadcaster ARD reported that a 74-year-old German man and his wife were being investigated for allegedly acting as double agents for Germany and China. The man, referred to as Dieter W., delivered intelligence from various countries to Germany's Foreign Intelligence Agency, BND, for almost 50 years. On one of his visits to China, Chinese Communist Party officials allegedly contacted him. They reportedly asked him to deliver sensitive information about Germany to China, but it is unclear if Chinese officials knew about the couple's connection to Germany's BND. According to ARD, he reported this to German officials, but still kept in contact with Chinese officials, which was unknown to his German superiors. Germany's intelligence chiefs agree that a stronger defense against the rising threat of espionage is needed. Reporting by Arian Pazdar, NTD News, Berlin.
The U.S. has awarded $1.6 billion to a company developing a vaccine for the CCP virus. Novavax's stock has since surged more than 30%.
The U.S. government has awarded Novavax $1.6 billion to fast-track a potential coronavirus vaccine in the United States, with the goal of delivering 100 million doses by the beginning of next year. The cash grant is the biggest handed out so far as part of Operation Warp Speed, the White House's effort to speed up the fight against COVID-19. The money will cover manufacturing, distributing, and testing of the hoped-for vaccine, including late-stage human clinical trials, which could begin as early as October. Novavax is just one of many biotech and drug companies using funding from the U.S. Regeneron announced Tuesday that it has signed a $450 million contract with the U.S. government, also under Operation Warp Speed, to make and supply a potential COVID-19 therapy, a double antibody cocktail that could both prevent and treat COVID-19. Regen-CoV-2, as it is called.
Detailed information is now available regarding the 4.9 million PPP loans made to businesses over the last 3 months. The Treasury Department and the U.S. Small Business Administration released the data for Paycheck Protection loans, totaling $521 billion.
The Treasury Department and the U.S. Small Business Administration revealed detailed data about the recipients of loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. As of June 30th, almost 4.9 million loans were made to businesses across the U.S. during the CCP virus crisis, with over $520 billion lent. The overall average loan size was approximately $107,000, but over two-thirds of all loans were for $50,000 and under, and loans of over $1 million accounted for less than 2% of those given out. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said the PPP is providing much-needed relief to millions of American small businesses, supporting more than 51 million jobs and over 80% of all small business employees. He said the Treasury was particularly pleased that more than a quarter of the PPPs had been lent in low and moderate income communities. Likewise, 1/4 of all jobs supported were in urban or rural communities or hub zones, this accounting for 13 million jobs. SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza said the PPP had been a success for small businesses. The data released was broken down to include loan information such as zip codes, business types, and demographic data. It also included information on nonprofit organizations and names of lenders. The Paycheck Protection Program is part of the Coronavirus Relief CARES Act, passed by Congress with bipartisan support. It was signed into law by President Trump on March 27th.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.